Welcome, Aaron. It's good to have you here. Welcome to Talking Apes. How are you feeling?
Good. Yeah, really good. I'm glad I got an opportunity to stop by the studio.
Yeah,
check out the job site.
Right. Yeah. We just got tools and plywood everywhere at the moment, and we got some big dreams. Think the bar is going to go there, and that's pretty much all the dreams is the bar.
That's all you really need.
Yeah.
On a job site is a bar.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Well, we do have the hockey game revival center ready to go, though.
What's that? What is it?
The TV's up.
Oh, okay. I get it. So, Aaron, for those that don't know who you are, give us a little kind of introduction. What do you do? What have you done? What do you like? What do you not like?
What do you want to do?
What do you want to do? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, no.
What do you want? What don't you want people to know that you've already done?
All the secrets, eh?
Yeah. Spell them.
Yeah, no, I been in the construction industry for about 16 years now. So quite a bit of time right out of high school. Honestly, really good experience to get my journeyman ticket for plumbing and gas fitting. I've used those skills I've learned on site quite often in my life. I'm sure you can attest to this, even building a garage, getting, equipment or materials at discount. Yeah. Built my whole basement free drywall because of the project I was on. Case of beer, of course. I've loved the journey, and I'm always learning all the time.
So give me maybe a bit of an idea, more of maybe information on your contracting time, because you've kind of gone from the contracting to now being on the inspection side, and then you're trying to work some magic with this entrepreneurial venture. That we'll get more into that. I really want to pick your brain on your contracting experience. Did you get your journeyman ticket here in Calgary?
Yeah. My whole apprenticeship was through SAIT in Calgary,
okay.
Alberta.
Shout out SAIT.
Yeah, spent a bit of time in Ontario working out there for the company I was apprenticing for. And honestly, I was very fortunate to be able to work in a multitude of different industries inside mechanical systems. So multifamily is where I started. And
I'm sorry.
Hey, it was actually pretty fun. Good crew, good group of guys. I remember my first day on the job site, straight out of high school. I had spent a bit of time framing when I lived out in BC. So a little bit of tool experience, but not much.
Are you originally from BC or?
No, born and raised Calgarian. My grandparents lived out in BC, so I spent a year out there with them. Mm-hmm. So first day on the job site, and first task they give the green guy, jackhammer, drill a couple holes down to the parquet through the concrete. So they hand me this Hilti hammer drill, and they marked out the holes for me. So I drilled my first hole, no problem. Second one, I'm leaning into it, and I probably spent about an hour leaning into it, trying to push. And I'm like, I just got to push harder. And there's, contractors working around me just pissed off because I'm making so much noise. And it changed the pitch when I was hitting something in the concrete. And I didn't know. They came and checked on me, and they pulled the drill bit out, and it's just glowing red. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, you hit rebar. And I'm like, what's rebar? Well, there goes a couple $100 bit. So,
oh, God.
But anyway, good experience. Never stop learning. You're going to make mistakes, but there's always a solution is what I've discovered on sites,
You never got the left cross from the handle when it really grabbed something?
Oh, I've taken a few jabs to the face, drilling up through the condos.
And was this before or after safety actually came onto the job sites?
Safety was pretty loose. Yeah. I remember no training, running a snorkel lift, around a job site, not knowing what I was doing, no harness.
That's how you got training.
That's how you got training.
On the job training.
You either survive or you don't. So, no, I was lucky. I had an awesome crew, awesome foreman, still friends with a lot of the guys I was raised with in the trades. And it's really neat to see where they've ended up, either instructors at the technical college now or inspectors for the city. So for me, I went into the consulting side of business, and it's been a great journey. It flies by though.
Maybe I want to ask this question. I know a lot of tradespeople. I know a lot of plumbers, HVAC technicians that are, significantly into their lives, into their careers, that are still in the trades and still in the construction side of the business. Now, I also know probably a 50-50 split of a whole bunch of people that just kind of either had fatigue or wanted to just get out of being on the tools or being related to the construction side of the business. I mean, you're a small example.
Up at 5:30.
So maybe that's the question: is that what kind of when did you just wake up one day and be like, you know what, I don't want to be on the tools anymore. I don't want to be on site anymore. I do want to be on site, but I don't want to do this anymore. Like, what was the shift? Is it something specific, or just I'll let you kind of take it?
I guess throughout construction, you're always chasing that next target, right? You're an apprentice. You want to get your first year. You want to get your second year, third year, fourth year. You get those pay raises, a little more responsibilities on site. I was fortunate to get my journeyman within 3.5 years of starting my apprenticeship. So I fast tracked it. It didn't have anything to do with, getting my wife pregnant at a young age or anything, but that did light a fire under my ass.
Yeah.
Sorry
to interrupt. I didn't know that you can fast track your journeyman ticket. Like, how does that work?
It's all based on hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were putting in.
You can get the
serious
hours
time.
and exactly.
Well, back then you could work 65-hour weeks. Like, like easy.
We were always doing overtime. Yeah.
We were
Weekends.
finding you can get a backhoe to dig your groundwork. So you'd go into bus stops and, hey, I'll pay you $25 an hour to dig a trench.
Oh yeah.
Do you think people are still doing that now?
No.
No.
No, there's a lot of, like you said, safety, a lot of guidelines they have to follow and training. If somebody gets hurt on your job site, you're getting researched why and who is on your job
because there's
site.
a lot more accountability with like WCB and OSHA and stuff
Well,
like that.
even every site you're going to, you're doing your safety video, your safety presentation, getting your sticker now.
Yeah.
It's different game now.
I got a couple of stickers back in my site walking days. I'm not gonna claim to be hardened or anything like that, but sorry, I kind of interrupted your flow there. So kind of going through getting your apprenticeship in an accelerated period of time, and then you kind of moving to
so always searching for that next target. So for my company, it was get that journeyman ticket, work your way up, get the pay raise, and then eventually be a lead hand or a foreman to run a job site. And I was fortunate to be able to get the opportunity to run my own little job site. Warehouse is where I started. And after that, they just kept giving me bigger, more projects. And we kept, crushing the deadlines and doing a really good job on the sites. I had a really good crew and just got more and more experience, more experience under the belt and more responsibilities, and was able to progress up the ranks pretty quickly there. So
interesting. And then kind of moving out of that, what was that? What was the catalyst?
Yeah,
there?
so I had worked for the same company for 10.5 years. So it's a long time, and always hitting that next target.
That's interesting that you said that 10 years is a long time. I could probably think of a few people that would, you rewind the clock, maybe go to the 90s even. I don't think you need to go to the 80s, but go to the 90s, and people say 10 years is you're just getting started with a company. I mean, the mentality's changed. I'm not necessarily challenging that. It's just funny to think that 10 years today is considered an extremely long time, whereas, maybe
for one company.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
I think like what Aaron's talking about as well is always progressing to that next step. A lot of the time, if you're trying to develop your skills, you're not getting that with one company, so you're moving. The fact that you got to transition and do different job sites and a lot of different work is really what I think is what people are chasing after, is that experience and find out what they really like to do, right?
100%. And I was fortunate. I got to work in like I mentioned, multifamily, condo, high-rise towers, industrial, slaughterhouse processing plant, which is pretty intense, hotels, power plants, everything. So I did get a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. So really fortunate, but like you said, you kind of reach a plateau and you want to see what else you can work into. So yeah, and then I reached out and eventually got onto the consulting side of business, which is basically the engineering. So it's a mechanical electrical engineering firm. And my role would be the construction management of the project. So once they've been designed by the engineer, it gets turned over to me, and I manage the project from there.
So did you go do like a project management course? And
No, it's not. It's mainly from the job site experience. They wanted someone that was up to date with the latest codes. They had a lot of gray hairs, I guess, doing the same role as me, but they weren't up to date with the latest changes in codes, and they wanted someone.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the one thing that I've always been troubled with is you can get your ticket in 79 and you have the same credentials as somebody coming out of school in 2020.
Yeah. And a lot changes.
Tons. I mean, when I first got my ticket, we didn't have condensing boilers out. Well, we did, but they weren't supposed to condense back then.
Yeah, that's an accident.
But I mean, now you go into people that had their tickets 20 years before me, and it's a whole different ballgame on how you install those many boilers instead of one large boiler. What are your thoughts on continuing education credits in order to work on some of the most technical equipment out there?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I definitely think they should add certifications for certain systems you're allowed to work on. And they do for certain things like healthcare, let's say Medigas, you have to be certified. ABSA for high pressure vessels. You need that certification, I guess, internally in the company as well as outside another inspector with ABSA. So yeah, I agree. If it can harm life, that's where they're sticking to it. But if it's, an error in the way they piped a condensing boiler system, it won't kill someone, it'll cost money. So they're not really enforcing certain training, I think.
Do you think a lot of that comes from a lot of that continuing education, continuing certification, accreditation comes from usually the commercial side of the business, where there's a lot more liability, there's a lot more money involved, whereas for the most part, mom and pop shops or 2, 3, 5, 10-man businesses are just doing, referral business or word of mouth business and a little bit of, kind of searched and acquired leads. Do you think, a broad strokes system or qualification or, like you said, just a refresher course or something like that?
You know why I think it's such a big deal is I think that without the tradespeople getting the CECs and doing their continuing education, I think you only install what you're comfortable installing. So if you got training 20 years ago on a hydronic system, the progression that's been made now, you're not going to take the time to learn it. You're not going, especially in a smaller community, because nobody's coming out there.
Yeah.
Right.
I think maybe I had an interesting comment on that is, I think for the most part, let's say you are a contractor who 20 years ago installed the hydronic system and went and did a course, et cetera, and never really kind of touched on it. But at the same time, the reason why you didn't really keep updated with it was because you didn't find yourself having that many installs, perhaps.
No, and that's why I say, like, the continuing education credits, if you look at Division 15, it's massive. Like there's so many things that Division 15 encompasses. So to separate that out, I'm even talking right into the continuing education credits towards business. How to properly run a business for a small contractor, right? That can be a CEC. Right. But when we're talking about the equipment installations, I mean, I think it's important to know the newest steps. You think about a house that's 20 years old, you were building for air losses and everything. Now they're compact, like they're so tight that a guy who did his training 20 years ago isn't going to have a first idea of how to do it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Interesting. I think this is an interesting topic, and I maybe want to tag on this. But first, I just wanted to maybe pull back to, where you're kind of going from being on site, running a job site, interacting with someone who may have been a construction manager from an engineering firm, to being the construction manager or engineering firm. How was that transition? How were you received, especially when you went back to do inspections on your former employer, which I'm sure has happened over the course of the history? I mean, just from personal knowledge, I know that, you guys have a good relationship, you left on good terms. So, going back onto the site and seeing some of your past colleagues, maybe someone who would have been your lead hand now who's running the job site, and you're going in and inspecting the site. What was that like?
Yeah, honestly, the transition was really exciting for me personally. I had, my office was my truck basically. So by the time I was leaving, I was in a company truck, running around the city, managing different projects, different sites. I had multiple commercial projects on the go. So transitioning to the consulting world, where basically I was handed a list of projects to manage. I was presented as the contact, and I ran my own ship. So that was very similar to being on the construction side. So really, it's just a lot of time management skills that, I had to develop on my own. There was no formal training for that. But I did have really good mentorship, really good guidance from not only the consultants I got on with, but also past contract supervisors from the past. So yeah, no, but as far as going to site and seeing your old buddies there, like it's pretty fun to do. Obviously when my job is to identify deficiencies on site that do cost the contractor money if they have to repair things. Communication's the biggest part, right? Like, so in the contract, they all price to the contract. So they have to adhere to the legal document, the specifications. And my job is to enforce that. So, having that communication, the contractor, if you can explain it to them, most of the time it works out fine. But, the job can be difficult when you have to call them on what was, installed in error, and they have to repair it on their own dime. So that can be challenging, especially having past experiences and friendships with
people. Yeah.
People. Yeah.
Are there any typical shortcuts that you see that you constantly have to correct on site? And I'm really curious about that, because I know that, especially in the multifamily game, because it's a lot of, copy paste work. Even just general office building, floor by floor, for the most part, unless the tenants have been already assigned, you're looking at, building just a prefab model across the building. Prefab is the wrong word, but just basically a carbon copy on every floor, and then the tenant improvement contracts come in, and then we make changes. I feel like in that circumstance, there's going to be a lot of contractors, and this isn't to throw shots at anybody or anything like that, but I'm sure there's shortcuts that happen, and that, you remember, you guys maybe from your days on the tools witnessed or attempted, and then things changed. Now you're on site inspecting, you're looking for certain things that it's kind of a habit.
Yeah. So shortcuts, honestly, they're on both sides, consulting and contracting.
Of course.
The consultants, you have to be as efficient as possible to maintain your profits. So, you have a master spec, you have certain drawing libraries. You do copy and paste and edit as needed to complete the design. So same thing on the construction side. You try to stick to a certain standard, and the training of your employees will dictate what type of project you want to bid on. So if you get onto a project with a specific spec that calls for a different design that you're not used to, Now all of a sudden, if your estimation wasn't really thorough with that inspection of the contract, you get the job. You didn't know it had to be a certain type of material or a piece of equipment to satisfy the engineer drawings. So now the shortcut would be to try to get that system changed to something you are familiar, the boiler you are familiar with, the PEX pipe instead of copper, plastic instead of cast iron, drainage, right? So those are the cutting the corners to maintain those profits. And there's a fine balance of allowing that in, but not giving the customer a product they didn't, they thought they were getting, right? That's the fine balance.
So that's something that you commonly see is just the substitution of stuff.
Cost savings. Yeah.
Okay.
So our engineers will design a system, basis of design for a particular manufacturer.
Yep.
They spend a lot of time designing it, making sure it all works together. And then come construction time, I'm basically the gatekeeper to allowing alternates to come into a project. And how will that affect the engineer's original design?
How much will you actually get involved with suggesting an alternate or asking for ideas for an alternate versus waiting for the contractor to come to you?
Yeah, so in our spec, we have a list of approved alternates that are on there. But let's say during a tower design, they'll go through a round of cost saving options. And most of the time it's the contractor, general contractor, trying to get the alternates in to save some money. So I'm involved with reviewing those alternates if they meet the spec. And that's one thing that's pretty tricky because a lot of these specs and shop drawings are hundreds of pages of information, all different, metrics on there and sizes and weights. And, the air handling unit, let's say a packaged air handling unit can be the same capacities. It'll provide the same amount of air, but it's X amount bigger, and structural didn't allow for that. And now that's the fine balance, is really juggling that and knowing when to allow alternates and when to stick to your guns and stick to what was specified.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then a follow-up with that is, how many engineers do you think stay current with the designs? Like, how many times are you approached with, hey, I've got this other unit, it's more efficient, it's less money, like...
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Yeah. We get, so we have technical lunch and learn sessions. So an alternate or a sales manufacturer will come in and present a technical presentation, not necessarily a sales pitch, but a really technical presentation to educate the engineers on what else is out there as an option. And it gives the consultants an opportunity to really grill the manufacturer and say, well, I heard this about your product. Your warranty's not equal to what we spec currently. So it opens up that dialogue. So we do get that quite often. Yeah.
And do you prefer the manufacturer, or are you seeing a transition where agents are becoming more technical in order to present to an engineer?
Oh yeah, the manufacturer reps.
Yeah.
No, they're engaged. They build the relationship, and they usually bring the specialists in when they're coming in from out of town, and be able to showcase the technical side and really dig into that.
How often would you say, maybe just a random, throw out a ballpark percentage perhaps, when you have a engineering lunch and learn type session, how often is it that there's actually a change made? If the product is revolutionary as it say it is, it has case studies, it has proven applications in similar environments, how often is it that the master spec is actually changed? That you're looking at it from a construction management perspective, you're looking at it, a lot of the time from an alternates perspective. But I'm sure you're in those conversations where, master spec, of course you're in all those lunch and learn presentations or, manufacturer showcases. How often does the master spec actually get changed?
It's constantly being reviewed and updated. We have a pretty good management team that involves everyone and gets their input on what we should change or add or delete based on lessons learned on site. You know, was the service there? I mean, we've removed some manufacturers based on poor service. So it does get changed and updated, at least in our firm. Yeah, definitely.
And I guess now is good a time as any. Everybody's talking about buying local. You have any customers that are reaching out and saying like, we want an emphasis on Canadian built products?
Definitely. Well,
I know that's putting you on the spot, but I think now like everything that I'm seeing is really about supporting local economies, even national economies, stuff like that.
yeah, no, that's a really good question. Just trying to think. So for lead projects, there's
Keep going.
there's a series of checklists, and if a product is manufactured closer to the project, you get lead points. So that's a big part of it. Definitely depends on the relationship and the service that we get, because the manufacturers really provide a lot of help designing a system. Let's say a pump manufacturer, they do a lot of the work. So if they have a good relationship, we're more likely to have them as basis of design.
It's pretty difficult though to try to maximize. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe it is possible, but it's pretty difficult to get a project that I would probably think is all Canadian or even at least all North America.
I would not say like I would expect people to compromise on the build or the quality or the efficiency in order to go Canadian. If there was an equivalent, is that ever a factor is what I'm asking. Like,
Yeah, so that's definitely come up, and actually lead times of equipment will win you a job.
Yeah.
So if you come in and do a technical session and you say, most lead times are 12 weeks, but because we're local or Canadian, we're down to 4 to 8, that can win you a job.
Interesting.
Yeah, so ultimately it is the contractor who provides the PO. The engineer, can't necessarily favor a piece of equipment, but they can use it as a basis of design. Certain government projects, you can't even name the piece of equipment. You just say air handling unit 1, this airflow rate, this capacity, provide it. So that's government saying, yeah, we're open to anyone that fits the bill.
Yep.
And then on to kind of tack onto that with government project, is it not? You have to have 3 separate, quotations or proposals.
Oh, yeah.
From 3 separate entities at the very minimum, I think. Right.
Yeah, 3 bids.
Yeah.
That's pretty typical, if not more.
Can't just give it all to S&C Lavalin.
Good shot. That'll go far in Alberta.
I can just see Tom's like, no chance. It's okay. I like being unemployed. It's okay.
Yeah. No, we work with a lot of government on a lot of government projects, and yeah, they definitely take multiple bids. They don't necessarily always take the low bid, but they do quite often.
I find it interesting that the government wouldn't actually specify we take precedent on having Canadian products first.
That's a really good point.
I'll take a crack
Yeah.
at that. I think it's for most government projects, there's a lot of eyes on it because it is taxpayer money. So it's great, but it's 10 times as expensive to buy this Canadian product when I could have bought something from China or India or
Mexico.
or even the US,
Yeah.
right? And I think in that scenario where there's a lot of eyes on something as simple as a politician's, let's say, expense account, when you have maybe something that could be $1 million or $2 or $3 or $5 or $10 million more, from just a purely cost perspective, I think that may be one of the reasons. But I do agree, there should be emphasis on.
Yeah, I agree.
So what would you say would be a justifiable percentage difference of buying Canadian versus buying from another country?
That's an interesting question.
Like if we got to have a full disclosure from the Canadian government, we said, wow, that was that much money? Like, why? Well, we decided to buy Canadian. it was 15% more, maybe that equals $1 million, maybe that equals 25 million. Would Canadians go, no, I'm okay with that?
And maybe you have a good point. I think a lot of that money comes back into the government because you're supporting a Canadian business, and then they pay taxes, and then there's a lot. It's like a trickle down effect. I think to at the end of the day, that benefits the Canadian economy overall.
Well, let's turn it. How much do you think the U.S. is saying no, American made? Like, I know they have benefit.
Oh, yeah.
They have rebates based on American for their projects.
I'm sure Canada does as well. I think we got to fact check that, Tom. Little ticker.
It'll be up on the screen.
It'll be up on the screen if whether or not Canada has rebates. But I mean, I think that's a valid point, right? And
so one aspect on the energy efficiency side, so there's actually carbon embodied programs where they look at what it costs to manufacture something, transport it to the site. So the government, especially after this lockdown, they'll be pouring a lot of money into energy efficiency projects. And that's a really good point that will help local businesses, because you can say, hey, we manufactured it here, we only shipped it this far, it cost this much carbon to get it to your site. So if you're getting solar panels from China, how much carbon did it take to produce that there under coal or whatever power they use, and then ship it across the ocean? So that aspect, it's not something you think about, but it's coming into play soon.
I think it's going to be a massive part, because we've got all this resistance to oil and gas, and what we really need to monitor is the efficiency of the actual combustion of that.
Yeah.
Right? When we're talking about shipping from overseas, like, what does that ship consume, and how efficient is it?
Yeah,
right?
It's something no one thinks about.
And when you're dealing with a country with no regulations, that
coal-fired China.
That 10 to 15% isn't looking so bad.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a really good point.
That's a very similar way to which they kind of calculate points on the lead system, correct? It's again, whereas that's what you're talking about is that, the place of origin and its transportation to here. Interesting. That's a very interesting topic. Well, it's kind of shift from that, in terms of your experience on the construction to being a consultant within the business. What would you notice in terms of just kind of general business attitude? Right? Is there like a mentality difference primarily? Because I know that the way the business is built, it's billable hours, it's basis, it's design based, and then you have, a certain fee structure that gets you up to here, and then after that, it's all kind of add-ons and tack-ons. Outside of the business framework, what do you see as like a general mentality? Because I'm sure you've interacted with not just individuals within the consultant firm that you're currently with, but other ones as well, either from your past life or even today at industry networking events. What's the big difference that you see in just kind of a mindset, consultant versus contractor? Yeah,
so definitely on the consulting side, we're a bit of a commodity, because, you can pick a consultant to do your design out of a phone book, right? Why would you pick a certain consultant over another is the service, right? Who are you getting to do the work? Who's going to manage it through? And that has been drilled into our company is the service. We return calls, we answer calls, we get back to you in a very timely manner. That would be the benefit to going with one consultant over another. I've heard horror stories of, on a project, we allow for a certain amount of site reviews or inspections. And I've spoken to a few architect clients, and they never see, once the job's awarded, they get the design, they never see the consultant again. So now it's up to the contractor to just design it and turn it over. And there could be a lot of issues with that building or property after the fact that was never checked. So those are some of the lessons learned that, a developer might, take the low bid and get a poor quality product at the end.
That comes back to, you get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for. That's basically it. So
interesting.
Yeah, really get to know who the consultant or even the contractor is, if you can get access to referrals, that, that speaks wonders. If they won't give you referrals of your last few projects, then that's a red flag, I would say.
Now, I know that a big part of what you're doing currently is energy auditing. That's become a big thing, I think, across Canada, probably, as well as specifically within your scope of work. Do you see any trends in the current, we'll stick with, let's say, Alberta for now, because I know that that's kind of your organization's coverage. You see any trends that are maybe not so good on the energy efficiency side of things? People just kind of leaning on one thing because it works or whatever?
Yeah, so I think the government obviously drives that type of innovation investment because a lot of the technology doesn't make sense, return on investment wise. Solar, for example. So in my opinion, I know the government, puts incentives in place, let's say for a school to put solar farm on their roof. And I do think it's a good idea to get that infrastructure, get the conduits ran while a new build's going up, get your two-way meters so you can charge back to the grid and earn some money on that. I just think I see the return on investments on, a retrofit property, 50 years return on investment. Yeah. We completed a solar study. So that's another thing you should get done is a study before you just pull the trigger on anything like that. And that's what we do as well. Either a feasibility or a full-on audit of a property. But it's interesting seeing the numbers for me. If I'm an owner and I don't plan on owning that property longer than 10 more years, why would I invest in something that won't return 50 years? Mm-hmm. And it won't even last 25.
Yeah. It's funny. I've been able to work in BC, Alberta. Part of my role was always watching BC, Alberta, especially like the last 10 years. And you see BC leading the way, I would say in Canada, in terms of high efficiency equipment. And I don't give a shit about gas versus electric. That is not something I'm going to get into today, but I will. But when you've got high efficient gas burning equipment going in versus Alberta, where we're still seeing a lot of mid efficient equipment in, and BC is driven heavily by government rebates to be put in. Do you think Alberta should be maybe offsetting carbon or like something, like pay into the carbon tax, but get the rebate if you do the proper steps?
Yeah, Alberta is definitely behind the times compared to BC and Ontario and Europe, quite frankly, but they're slowly getting better. So, our previous government started Energy Efficiency Alberta, and a lot of businesses were interested in getting that information. What kind of discounts, LED lighting upgrades, what can I do to lower operating costs? And since then, that program's been shut down by the new government. But as far as incentivizing innovation, I think they're getting a lot better at it. But we're definitely on the forefront of helping educate the clients that we do have. What are their options, right? But yeah, no, definitely BC is ahead of us as far as innovating and having the government incentivize, like you said, for mid-efficient pieces of equipment. They're slowly getting stricter. Like we have an energy code that's been in place since 2016, November, and we have to design to that. So it's basically like LEED silver. Mm-hmm. So that's the federal government implementing requirements for new build construction. So and so basically they're allowed to put in a mid-efficient if they had extremely well-insulated windows or it's a prescriptive system.
If the overall building maintained a level or exceeded, right?
Yeah, that's how they do it.
Now, again, even without rebates, how educated do you think the end user or the building owner is, considering that even without rebates, the payback is often quicker Like you'll hit that kind of point in the road where that high efficient equipment pays itself off, and then you keep on saving. Even if it's a 10-year investment, often we're hitting that, like that break even point at 6.5 years.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's a really good point. I guess it depends on what type of developer it is. Are they the type that develops and sells the building right away? Because they're going to want to go the cheapest, quickest route. If we work with clients that build the building and own it, they definitely invest in better quality products. They're more open to, innovative designs that will, maybe be more cost per square foot up front, but like you said, pay off in 5 years.
Yeah.
And keep paying you off.
And that's the way I always say, like your highest cost system is generally like, let's say you're going to end up spending 20 grand no matter what, right? Now you can spend 20 grand and have, or you can spend 12 grand, but your bills are going to be so much higher. So you're going to end up spending that at 6.5 years, or you spend 18 grand and your bills are so much lower. And then after that 6.5 years, then you just keep saving. And that's where and they're typically more comfortable as well, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. User comfort. Let's say it's an office building, you'll be more productive. So all of that is all part of the education process. Manufacturers, contractors, consultants, everyone's got to educate the people with the money owning these properties on, it's always the sales game. Everyone hates the word sales, but everything is sales. You have to sell a client on 100%. A particular item because it's the best product for them at the time.
And so how influential is your firm on really presenting those options of going to a higher efficiency system?
Pretty influential. But again, so on the consulting side, we would do a basis of design. We have a lot of discussions with the ownership. Once it gets turned over, let's say a new build with a contractor, they have quite a bit of sway as well because they're the ones that can say, hey, I can save you 100 grand here. And then it comes back to us. So, it's that fine balance and ultimately it is the owner's money. So they have to decide.
Do you have any, so if any buildings that are being leased out, like there's tenants that are moving in, and do you have any data on tenants staying longer because their cost of operating is lower? Or their comfort level is high or anything like that? Is it something you want to monitor and something you're getting into?
Yeah, no, there's definitely, I've seen stats for that. Let's say a LEED or a BOMA certified building. They do say their, performance is enhanced because they're more comfortable. And I have worked on properties where they did cut corners and there's constant complaints. But that is a really good point. That would be a good, story to bring up to a client, why not to cut out a certain design feature that we had worked into a property because you're going to have complaints all the time. And if they own that property, they'll listen. If they're going to flip it,
well, I think it's actually as we're getting into these buildings that are being monitored all the time online, and I think it's a good selling feature for a company. You look at all these companies that are like, oh, our building is completely off grid. I think tenants are actually becoming more vocal about having a building that is there for perception, like a school system getting a solar system that probably isn't doing anything, but the perception is they're doing something important, right?
100%. Yeah.
Do you almost feel like, in that scenario, let's take Calgary as an example, because it's a really good example, especially right now, where is it 47%? They're predicting even after things get back to somewhat of a normalcy after COVID, that it's going to be the occupancy rate is going to go, or the unoccupancy rate, whatever the opposite of that is, the vacancy rate.
There it is.
That's what it is. The vacancy rate.
What's in that?
The vacancy rate has gone from, I think, 24% to 43%, something like that. The exact numbers, again, Tom put it on
fact check.
Yeah, fact check. Does that change things? One, because there's so much supply out there, and two, people aren't making a lot of money right now. So cost becomes such a huge factor in decision making, and image and social responsibility almost becomes a secondary. What do you do in that scenario where the economy is perhaps struggling, but we need to have an emphasis on sustainability, energy conservation, with an eye on climate change, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this isn't even getting into the conversation of oil and gas and energy as a broad concept, but just occupancy, real estate, in that from that angle of things.
Yeah, honestly, I think it will change, right? Like now that a company knows they can work remotely, and they might have employees that love it or hate it. We have both in our office. Yeah. I'm a bit of a mix. I like working from home. It saves me. I have a bit of a commute, so I like working from home. And, it saves me from driving a couple hours every day because I'm far south. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll see a condensed opportunity for office leasing, and it's going to be a tough market for anyone in commercial real estate.
It's interesting. There was somebody from Google, I believe, who was interviewed, and they predicted that more office space would be required going into the future, because what this has brought to light is that we need more space between people.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it was as we transition, because let's face it, it could be a year and a half, 2 years before we actually come up with a vaccine. Mm-hmm. Right. Obviously, our economy is not going to sustain being off for 2 years. Right. Mm-hmm. So in order to create that, they're saying that we need more square feet per person in order to have a safe working environment. So they figure that his estimation is that the office space will actually be taken.
That's a really good point. And I've been part of a few discussions on how to get offices back and operating after COVID lockdown. Mm-hmm. And those were brought up. Distancing, extra barriers, even the way they design them now. We were chatting with an architect, and they're not going to be using cloth or certain materials, carpets. Yeah. They want everything to be able to wash down. Yeah. They're learning from this. So it's an interesting point. As far as square footage, you can't necessarily have co-shared workstations anymore. So that's a good point.
And what about indoor air quality? Like, are you talking about that a lot more? Like getting UV lights, injecting ozone?
Yeah, definitely. So, we've been approached to do assessments on properties for the liability of a company. Like if you allow your staff to go back and there's an outbreak and you didn't do any kind of checks beforehand, how liable are you now?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a big issue, and we're gearing up for that. And we're working on providing checklists and things they can do to check, like you said, UV lights, humidification even for systems. Yeah. Those are some of the things we've discussed. No touch faucets, doors, all that hardware.
Maybe touch on why humidification, because there's a lot of anybody who's getting shocked consistently at their office, there's a humidity issue. Why is humidity such a big...
Or at home. I mean, that's a big problem in Calgary. So many people, I mean, us included in our home, especially if it's a baseboard radiator system with a single boiler in a mechanical room, there's no humidity in your home. There might be air circulation, maybe a makeup air unit that feeds the hallways and the common spaces, but there's nothing in the units. Our unit, ours is a LEED gold building, and it is incredibly dry in our unit. Right?
So humidification is expensive. We design it in a lot of properties. Basically, it increases the comfort level. Really, the more you're more efficient when your humidity levels are in check, because your heat transfer's improved, right? And my understanding is that viruses basically within the ductwork, right, they can live longer if it's like a dry environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why, but building operators, again, that juggling act, they have to maintain a humidification system and put one in if they don't have it. So those can be issues. The filtration's a big topic. You can't just put in the best medical grade filter, HEPA filter, because your unit wasn't designed for it. Now you're using
now
more
you're starting
energy.
to talk about the motor resistance and cost of operating again.
Yeah. So cautioning property owners not to just go out and
Add
get
filters.
not add medical grade filters without getting,
What's the thought of, minimal resistance filtration, UV being one of them? Any other type of, I don't know, is there anything else that would be as minimal as possible on the resistance side of things so that you don't have to raise the flow rates or anything like that in your systems?
Yeah, I guess it would be project to project review, basically. Like, where is your return air going? Is it a common shared space, or is it ducted return? Things like that we would be looking at. Definitely exhaust systems. A lot of older properties we've done audits in, the building operator might not know that something's been shut down, like an exhaust. And we go in, well, you're not even exhausting certain, foul air out of your property. So
now, do you think that you'll see a rise in like HRVs just because of the air exchange and being able to eliminate the common air? Like there's a lot of shared air within an office space, within a zone system.
Yeah.
From office to office.
That's a really good
Do you
point.
think that HRVs will be more essential for commercial?
Yeah, definitely. So we implement HRVs or
ERVs,
ERVs quite often, but really the safer the property would be bringing in more fresh air, which is more expensive. So that's the fine balance again, right? You're going to be paying more, but you're bringing in fresh air and you're actually exhausting that return air and trying to capture that heat to preheat the incoming. So cost, but now it's a balance with liability now. So
yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Southern Alberta at our meatpacking facility.
Yeah, they got hit pretty hard.
That was significant, and now like the union is actually going after.
That's a good point.
So that will, I think, set a guideline moving forward on an open warehouse scenario, even though it's like stage, but in an office space.
I think there's a couple of different reasons perhaps why they say that places like meatpacking plants or any industrial setup would have a higher risk of transmission. I think one is that with all that noise, you're yelling and shouting over that to communicate with somebody who's, either they could be 8 feet away from you, but you're putting so much more effort into that, communication that, I don't know, I guess the infectious virus or whatever has more
Some
potential
people spit when they talk.
Exactly, right?
Speaking moistly.
I think we just found the title for this episode. Speaking moistly.
And I mean, not to discount the fact that air circulation filtration is definitely something that needs to be looked at, but that was definitely a factor that I've read in a few articles, because there was another place, I think either in California or in, I think maybe California or Arizona, a meatpacking plant that had a similar issue. Right? Like exact same case, like 100+ cases in one factory, where a majority of them were asymptomatic. That has to be said, but transmission was rampant, and it was kind of like, why is it so similar? Is it like a trend? Certain types of facilities get hit harder than others. I think one of the factors was people are yelling and screaming over loud, noisy equipment. Yeah, right? And that was the thing, because they're an essential service.
So they were moistly yelling.
They were moistly, letting their opinions be seen. The interesting thing is that we haven't seen that happen in other facilities, factories, manufacturing plants, because most of them are closed because they're non-essential. Meatpacking and anything related to the food industry, either grain or whatever, is considered essential, so they're still open. So who knows what's going to happen when we see the trickle back, because people want to get their plants going again. They want to get shifts open because
Well, tomorrow there's supposed to be 3 significant businesses where their staff are actually planning a walkout
Really?
in Calgary
Wow. Because they're opening? Or
because they've been open. So one of them is a shipping service based out of Calgary. One of them is a low cost store, right? And they're significant businesses in Calgary, but the employees are walking out because they don't feel they've been supplied or protected well enough.
Wow. Yeah. No, it'll be a big trend moving forward. So, you know, as negative as lockdown is and the virus, there's opportunity and, you know, positives in our industry to help the standard moving forward, right? Like,
So this might be another tough question. Do you feel that part of our industry has been neglected for far too long?
yeah,
you talking about air quality?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, and standards. Like I said, you know, an engineer, they want to design the latest, most advanced system they can, put their stamp on it for life.
Yeah.
But the developer and who's ever the client paying, they got to find that balance. So in the past, a lot of cuts based on a good design has turned into poor quality or a dangerous system even.
Yeah.
So no, that's a really good point. And we see that all the time, either doing a renovation where we say, what the hell was going on with this project? It might not have started off as that design, but it ended up a poor quality because of cost savings or inexperienced
Yeah.
contractors or designers. So
Interesting.
No, I think this stuff is something that has been very important for a long time, and you're right. It is often the things you can't see that get cut first.
yeah.
But I think as we start progressing and moving forward under these new standards, and again, 1.5 to 2 years is when they estimate coming up with a vaccine. I think that it probably will be something that is going to have a lot of significant time put into it.
We have a vaccine for the flu. Doesn't really stop, you know, it prevents mass outbreaks for sure. I mean, like that's the other thing too, is that a vaccine can come, but we still have to have precautions in
We
place.
may need to reach out to Bill Nye and get the scientific approach.
Bill
to this.
Nye is an engineer, not a real scientist. Did you know that? I don't think engineers
Taught
count
me
as
everything I know about science.
I wired my house from Bill Nye. Come on.
Oh man. But kind of goes without saying that regardless of whether we have a pretty strong, you know, precautionary measure like a vaccine, doesn't necessarily mean we're bulletproof, right?
No, but I think it always takes something to go wrong before we can make it right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Building code is built on blood, basically.
yeah.
Great Fires of Chicago, right? That triggered fire codes.
Yeah.
And building construction materials. Like it burnt down the whole city, basically.
Twice.
Yeah. So, yeah, unfortunately, you're right. Like, you know, problems have to happen before there's change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And kind of going off of that topic, I mean, we'll maybe kind of transition to what you're doing and what you're hoping to kind of get, you know, achieved. Tell us a little bit about Energy Visionaries.
Yeah. So, I mean, with the lockdown, it's tough to really go and have a coffee with a manufacturer rep that does have a great product to showcase. And we do rely on those constant contact meetings with them to gain that knowledge, right? So basically what I'm working on is an online platform to help educate business owners, consultants, and manufacturers of the different types of technologies on the market. And it's very simple video-based platform. It's really just to get that information as quickly and efficiently as possible to the people with the money that are going to be having to invest and make the shift in technology going forward. So that's the online platform, energyvisionary.com. So again, if you're a manufacturer that does have a product, you can apply to be showcased on that site. And really, it's a tool for business owners, managers to become educated and actually take action. There's a lot of government information or websites out there that I find pretty difficult. They don't just get to the point of what steps a client should take. There's just too much information on there. A lot of it is downloads or you're reading it. Yeah. So this is just a different format to educate, video-based, visual-based education platform. So
almost like a bit of a network.
Yeah,
where people can learn, communicate, share different technology. How'd you get started with that?
It's just something I've been passionate about. Always trying to innovate and bring solutions to clients that we work with. And a lot of our business, both in construction or consulting, is educating clients on what's available. And a lot of that is face-to-face conversation. So this is basically, unfortunately, perfect timing to start creating this content, but it's automating and vetting the clients. So if you are a business owner that is serious about investing and wanting to get the ball rolling, this is where you would go. If you're not interested, you wouldn't become.
So what would be your initial steps? If you had a business that was interested, what would you do? What would you start? What would be step one?
Step one would be basically creating a mission statement. So researching what other companies have done. So that's part of what we want to showcase is successful companies. So we work with some of the top commercial property managers in the world, and they would be number one in sustainability. So we want to showcase what steps they take, including creating a mission statement, creating a task force team of people that would be the lead on it. And that would be to research these products and really work with a consultant team at first to get, let's say, an existing property. You would audit the property and identify upgrades that you can make. And so that's part of our job, is to create these energy audit reports. And we outline every product, every energy conservation measure, we call them ECM. And we say what it is, how much it costs, and estimated return on investment. So it really helps the accountants identify what they want to invest in based on their capital available. The other thing is the funding, right? Do you have the money to invest in a $100,000 solar farm, right, for the next 50 years? So some of the information we have on this site is the new PACE program. So it's basically a way to fund a green energy project, or clean energy is actually the term, and not pay for it up front. You roll the cost into your property taxes. So whoever owns that property is paying a portion on your property taxes, and eventually it gets paid off in 10 or 15 years, and you get the savings.
Interesting. And all this is happening on your platform, which is it's all kind of happening real time online.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to keep updating and creating that content, and also vetting the technologies that we feel are, the best out there. Again, you have to apply to be showcased, and not every technology will make the cut. We don't want to show certain technologies to our members, and we want our members to be proud of what they're investing in, and also show it off and let everybody else know what they're investing in and why, and also show the return. So let us know how much you saved and be proud of it. I think a lot of businesses we work with, they do save a lot of money, and they should be praised for it, for innovating and actually taking that step.
So this is a long-term relationship from like step one till 15 years from now on.
Yeah, it's an ongoing, really. Yeah, it's an ongoing community. I just found that a lot of clients and even contractors and even certain consultants, they didn't know the steps, right? They didn't know the steps, and they could get involved. That's
Well, and that's something that we alluded to earlier is how many people are actually educated on current offerings, the steps that actually can, improve buildings, improve quality of life, sort of thing, right? And I think something like this is probably great just because you are educating people along the way, and therefore they can make a better decision, right?
Yeah, that's the simple goal of it for sure.
Beautiful. How do people get a hold of you? What's how do people kind of find out more about your organization, yourself, get a hold of you if they're interested in taking part?
Yeah, so the website is energyvisionary.com, all one word. LinkedIn, again, my name, Aaron Chute. You could search me that way, and feel free to reach out and join the community.
And you'll see the links in our info as well on this. So.
Tom, make it happen. Again, thanks again for making some time for us. We really appreciate your perspective, and it's been a pretty good conversation. I think we learned a little bit, and I think we'd love to have you back and have a few more conversations on energy, because I think that we've talked about Energy Visionaries in the past, and I think it's a very, very interesting platform for people to be able to engage and learn. And like you said, it's a long-term relationship. And I think that's something that's really been missing from our industry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really cool as to how you've modeled it to not just be a fleeting, 1 second, 1 minute thing. Awesome. Energyvisionaries.com. And we'll see you guys at the next week.